Reserve Bank Governor Phillip Lowe says we're getting close to the end of interest rate hikes. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese heads to India to sell Australia's wares. And a major new study says that money does make you happier. It's Thursday, the 9th of March, 2023. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, immediately after the show, you've got an interview coming up with Catherine Divott, who is the CEO of workplace and people consultancy Puzzle Partners.
Yes, we talk about whether the office is dead. How do you get people back in? Do you need to get people in? How do you manage your workforce? It's a fascinating chat with Catherine, all about managing people post-COVID.
Yeah, it is a good one. It's coming up a little bit later on. The main story this morning, though, Sean, Reserve Bank Governor Phillip Lowe said he is closer to pausing further interest rate rises, acknowledging the difficulties that higher rates are causing households, particularly since mortgage repayments are set to take up a record share of wages.
Yes, the day after the Reserve Bank delivered a 10th successive rate hike, that one was 25 basis points. Lowe yesterday said the board deliberated about the pain the 3.5 percentage point increase in rates over the past 11 months is causing households. He said monetary policy is now in restrictive territory, which means it's dragging on the economy. And the board agrees the central bank is now closer to the point where it will be appropriate to pause interest rate increases. The governor said interest rates are likely to consume a record 9.5% of household disposable income later this year. Now, the Reserve Bank hopes to get inflation back to 3% by 2025, and Lowe says unemployment can remain around 5%, adding that the post-pandemic boom had well and truly run its course. Lowe said Australia is finally starting to see the first signs of a slower rate of inflation, nominating clothing and household furnishings as examples, and he's keen to boost productivity across the economy.
Did he say much more, Sean, than he said in the statement on Tuesday after lifting rates?
On some of the substantive economic stuff like forecasts, not really. But the fact he was so open about the need to end the rate cycle is definitely significant. He was speaking at the Financial Review Business Summit, and he also took questions asked about his own personal financial position. He wouldn't bite. He did very well on that one. He said the Reserve Bank board took its job incredibly seriously, and he said there was a long way to go on central bank digital currencies, so basically don't expect anything anytime soon. But Phil Lowe yesterday was definitely talking about pausing interest rate increases.
Yeah, Dr. Lowe's take on rates in Australia was a pretty much a sharp contrast, really, to what the boss of the US Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, said yesterday morning.
Yes. He was far more hawkish, suggesting US rates might need to be quite a bit higher. Powell said the cooling in the US economy appears to have been partly reversed based on recent jobs data, consumer spending, production, and inflation figures. He said the ultimate level of interest rates in the US is likely to be higher than previously anticipated. Now, that sent financial markets into a bit of a tailspin, with the US dollar appreciating sharply against a basket of currencies. The greenback is at its highest level since the very beginning of this year. That meant the Aussie dollar fell sharply to under 66 US cents. Wall Street tumbled as well. Fears that rates will push the world's largest economy into a recession are alive and well. After Powell's statement, the broad-based S&P 500 fell about 1.5%. The tech-heavy Nasdaq fell a similar amount.
Basket of currencies, I reckon, would have to be one of my favourite terms that you use, Sean.
Is that right?
Where do you reckon it came from?
Well, it's basically when you talk about basket of currencies, they're trade-weighted indices. So it kind of depends on how much trade you do between countries. So Australia does a lot of trade with the US and with China and with Japan. So the yen and the renminbi and the US dollar is weighted heavier than other currencies. You didn't ask me any of this, did you? I've just gone off on a tangent here.
Do you think is it a wicker basket, do you reckon?
Oh, here I am, trying to give a serious economics lesson, and you're thinking about the wicker basket.
Oh, or maybe it's one of those ones in the supermarket, you know, the hard plastic with the handle that's always got some suspicious looking stains in it, and you're just like, oh, I'm not going to put my groceries in that.
Maybe move on.
All right. So baskets of currencies aside, Sean, plenty happening yesterday. With all of that going on, how did the local market perform?
Well, the local bourse followed the lead of Wall Street, falling nearly 1% to finish the day at 7,308 points. The banks and the big miners felt the slump. Macquarie and Westpac both fell more than 1%. Fortescue was down 1.4%. BHP was off more than 0.5%. Diversified miner South32 was off 2%. It was a very rough day for the gold miners as the price of the precious metal fell. Ramelius Resources was nearly 11% lower. Regis Resources, Silver Lake Resources, they both fell sharply. Market leader Newcrest Mining dropped 4%. There was a bunch of shares trading ex-dividend yesterday, Michael, including Blackmores, Brambles, Costa Group, Super Retail Group and Woodside Energy. That means if you bought yesterday, you won't get the dividend announced at the half-year results. As a result, ex-div companies nearly always fall on the day. Woodside's a good example yesterday. It was down 7%, which is about the value of their dividend. Shares in Qantas climbed to their highest level in 3 years yesterday. That was $6.74 at the close. That's after the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission said that domestic airfares remained above 2019 prices, and most airlines had improved delay and cancellation rates. Private equity group TPG said it had upped its stake in InvoCare, that's the funeral and crematoria operator, to 19.9%. Mesoblast jumped about 13% after the US Food and Drug Administration's Office of Therapeutic Products accepted its resubmission for a steroid refractory treatment. Lots going on, Michael, lots going on.
Sean, did you know that it's funny that you mention Mesoblast, because 1 year ago to the day, we spoke to the founder of Mesoblast on Fear and Greed. It was on March 9, 2022. And it is well worth a listen, because that was a fantastic insight into a company that just fluctuates so much.
Yes, and I remember him saying that it really, he can't afford to look at the share price because it just jumps around on every little bit of news in terms of what's happening in the US, what regulators say, what phase trials are up to. And I remember him saying, you just have to ignore it broadly.
Yeah, it's a really good chat. If you just Google Fear and Greed and Mesoblast, it should well come up. It is worth a listen. Anyway, Sean, we will be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Federal Treasurer Jim Chalmers says the government wants to substantially trim spending in the May budget and only invest where there is genuine value for money.
He said the government wants to make life a bit easier where it can, but it needs to show restraint as well. Chalmers says he's concerned about the position that Australians find themselves in with higher mortgage repayments, rents and energy costs. His comments came ahead of a meeting between Phil Lowe, the Reserve Bank Governor, and Suicide Prevention Australia CEO Neves Murray. Now, I don't know how often the Governor meets with similar not-for-profits, but clearly mental health of ordinary Australians is a concern at the central bank and certainly at the federal government level.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's interesting as well that the Treasurer is saying that they only want to invest where there is genuine value for money. Wouldn't you hope that that's kind of the standard anyway?
It's kind of table stakes. Although some of the states around the place have pretty much admitted to pork barrelling in recent years, so maybe he did have to make it clear.
Good point. Speaking of politics, Sean, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese headed off to India yesterday afternoon, leading a delegation including prominent business CEOs and university vice-chancellors.
Yes, the trip is aimed at strengthening the economic and security relationship between the two countries. It's the first Australian prime ministerial visit in more than 5 years, and Albanese will meet his counterpart Narendra Modi for the annual Leaders Summit. Now, there's a bunch of university vice-chancellors going, including Deakin University's Ian Martin, who will formally announce that Deakin will become the first foreign university in the world to be approved to establish a branch campus in India. Other attendees include Qantas boss Alan Joyce, Wesfarmers Rob Scott, Commonwealth Bank's Matt Comyn, and ANZ Chief Executive Shane Elliott. Now, Albanese this week, I don't know whether you saw it, Michael, he admitted he first visited India in 1991 as a backpacker. And he said he caught buses and hitched rides and boarded trains. I reckon this will be a bit different.
Tipping it will be a little different this time, yes.
I think so. And just quickly before we leave the Prime Minister, there are reports around today that he'll fly to San Diego early next week to meet with US President Joe Biden and UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to unveil details of the nuclear submarine deal. That's the AUKUS deal.
That group of CEOs that are going with the Prime Minister, that's got to be pretty close to an all-star CEO group, isn't it?
Yeah, Qantas, Wesfarmers, Commonwealth Bank, ANZ. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good.
If you tossed in as well Macquarie Group.
Yes. I'm not sure whether they've got any representatives going. Don't know.
But that would kind of just be perfect. You would think that would just be a rock star CEO tour.
Yeah, you'd want BHP in there though, wouldn't you?
I suppose you would.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, okay, maybe but just dismiss everything I just said, and we'll take it back to workshop it a little bit further. Sean, car sales will buy another 40% of Brazil's leading automotive digital marketplace, Webmotors, for $353 million, meaning that it will own 70% of the business.
Yeah, so Chief Executive Cameron McIntyre said it's a smart strategic move in car sales' fastest growing market for online vehicles. Brazil's the fifth largest automotive market in the world. It's got about 80 million cars on the road. Now, Webmotors has 430,000 car dealers or private advertiser listings. McIntyre is pretty relaxed about rising interest rates and what it means for car purchases. He basically said customers still buy cars, they just buy cheaper cars. Did you know that, Michael? Brazil's official interest rate is nearly 14%. It's 13.75%. Long way in front of Australia.
Wow.
Car Sales is undertaking a $500 million capital raising as part of the deal. As a result, its shares were suspended yesterday. Once the deal is done, revenue from overseas operations will make up more than 50% of turnover, which I thought was really interesting.
Sean, the Finance Sector Union has launched a major test case on excessive hours against National Australia Bank on behalf of managers who allegedly had to work between 55 and 80-hour weeks.
Yes, this could have big ramifications for the whole sector. Now, the union launched the federal court action yesterday on behalf of 4 managers who claimed they had to work unreasonable, unpaid hours over several years and are demanding compensation for damages to their health and family life. The case is expected to test for the first time what reasonable additional hours for white-collar workers actually means. Clearly, that will have ramifications for not only the 10,000 managers at NAB, but senior staff at the other banks as well. The issue of excessive hours has become a very hot topic in employment law. The Financial Sector Union is keen to have the court set a benchmark so that the financial sector will stop exploiting staff through excessive unpaid hours. Going to be very interesting to watch.
Sean, a sentence I thought I would never say, but to be a coal company. The price of the commodity has tumbled 60% since September last year, and the local coal companies like Whitehaven and New Hope have gone from best performing to some of the worst performers.
Yes, the worm has turned. In 2022, those two companies were among the top performers of the ASX too. The two Ronnies. Don't you miss the two Ronnies?
Sean.
1970s?
Yeah, I am, how old am I? 37. So,
no idea who the two Ronnies are?
No, I know who the two Ronnies are.
Good night from me and it's good night from him.
It's not as though I can miss something that was probably gone before I was born.
No, I digress. Basically, last year, Whitehaven and New Hope were among the top performers of the ASX 200. Since its December peak, just before Christmas, Whitehaven is down 35%. New Hope peaked back in October. Since then, it's off 27%. The other big performer last year was Yancoal. It's a bit different, though. Its share price is about where it was just before Christmas. But Yancoal is listed here as well as on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and it's majority owned by the Yangquang Energy Company. It's just not as liquid, so it doesn't trade as much. Coal prices are now back to levels last seen before Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, mostly it's because a record warm winter in Europe means demand for energy globally, including gas and coal, is much lower than expected. That's pushed prices lower, and just as they rode the wave of higher coal prices, they are falling off the crest. Don't know whether that's quite the right way of putting it. They are falling down the front of the wave of falling coal prices.
Oh, God. I don't even know. It's a metaphor, and look, you gave it everything there, Sean. And I just say thank you for not drawing attention to how long it took me to figure out how old I am. I just had this complete mental blank. Anyway, we got there in the end.
You're in the golden age, though, because, up until sort of 25, maybe 30, you remember your age.
Yeah.
And then after that, you don't really have to. And then you get to my age and you just worry about getting older every single year. So you know exactly how old you are when you're my age. I'm peak, really? Another year older?
I was just curious to know where you were going to go. I'm peak what? Insert something there. We could have gone anywhere, Sean. Shall we go back to business, though?
Yes, let's.
Because once again, yesterday, the Financial Review Business Summit heard from a number of senior business leaders. Energy transition got plenty of attention.
Yes, Origin Chief Executive Frank Calabria said the Albanese government's proposed reasonable pricing provision for gas prices is a key barrier for investment. He said the global investment community is not as keen to allocate capital due to uncertainty regarding the proposed provision. Calabria also said electricity prices are likely to jump more than 20% when the energy regulator unveils changes to default offers next week. Optus Chief Executive Kelly Bayer-Rosmarin spoke about the telco's data breach, describing it as a premeditated attack by a motivated, skilled hacker. She rejected suggestions that the data breach was a casual crime of opportunity because the telco left a window open through an unencrypted API. She said that didn't happen. And former boss of Macquarie Group, Nicholas Moore, who is now a special envoy for Southeast Asia, says the government needs to do more to help smaller companies invest in the region.
Sean, one last one before we get to international news. The competition watchdog will examine digital platform providers in Australia, such as Alphabet, which owns Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft and Meta, which owns Facebook.
Yes, it's part of the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission's 5-year digital platform services inquiry, and ACCC Chair Gina Cass-Gottlieb yesterday said local consumers and businesses are increasingly reliant on the products and services offered, so it's important the watchdog understands how they work, how they're expanding their reach. Makes sense to me. We're talking here, Michael, about everything from artificial intelligence, virtual and augmented reality, through to streaming, gaming, use of cloud services, fintech, home-connected devices, even how those companies operate in education and health and fitness. All that's great, but can you imagine trying to unravel how people use technology and how those providers somehow infiltrate daily life?
Oh, and it feels like it would be kind of like painting the Harbour Bridge. The moment you finish kind of studying that, you'd have to go and start again because technology would have evolved just in the time that you were studying it.
Yes. Totally agree.
Now, international news, Sean. President Xi Jinping has overhauled China's bureaucracy as part of a sweeping push to make the economy more self-sufficient, particularly as the US is trying to prevent Beijing from obtaining advanced technology.
So the plan strengthens oversight of the $60 trillion financial system. $60 trillion. Amazing, isn't it? It creates a new agency to manage data, and it also restructures the Ministry of Science and Technology. Now, the goal, according to a statement, is to better allocate resources to overcome challenges in key and core technologies and to move faster towards greater self-reliance in science and technology. What's behind all this? Well, of course, the US is increasingly using export controls, sanctions, and other punitive measures to prevent China from obtaining technology that could give it an economic or military advantage, particularly in areas like semiconductors and artificial intelligence. So Beijing has decided it really needs to go on its own.
Sean, finally, the saying goes, of course, that money can't buy happiness. And breaking news, apparently it's not true.
It's not. Money does buy happiness, as it turns out, and you get happier as you get richer, according to a major new study. Well, actually, that's until you hit about the $500,000 salary range. It's about 900,000 Aussie, and then you don't necessarily get a lot happier. They're not real sure what happens after that.
Well, you're at peak happy by that point.
Peak happy, I think so. So basically, a team of scientists, including the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist who introduced the idea of a happiness plateau more than a decade ago, they've found that contentedness does increase steadily in line with incomes. Surely we all knew that.
Yeah, we didn't really need a study to tell us that, did we?
In fact, it actually accelerates once you get paid more than $100,000 a year. Now, there is a catch. The person must enjoy a certain baseline level of happiness to begin with. So there's about 20% of the population that are just miserable. And they're never going to be happy no matter how much money they've got. That's basically what the study is saying. It's quite funny. The study of 33,391 people living in the US contradicts a famous 2010 paper by psychologist Daniel Kahneman and economist Angus Deaton. I don't know whether you remember this. It's 2010. It reported that happiness goes up with income until the the relationship starts to flatten at between $60,000 and $90,000 US dollars a year. And so the whole idea was, money makes you happy up until your point. Then when you're comfortable middle class, you don't get happier. That's been refuted. Now, Kahneman has rethought that one. He reckons money does make you happier.
I just love the fact that someone who wrote a study has then come out and contradicted his own study with a new study.
Yeah.
12 years later.
Amazing.
That's just extraordinary. That's that. I love that story. That's a good one, Sean. Good one to finish on. Up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview, and your guest today is Catherine Divot, CEO of Puzzle Partners, a workplace and people consultancy.
Yes, all about workplace post-COVID, how to run a workplace the best way and get most out of your workers, just make it a good place to be.
Yeah, it's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. And don't forget as well to check out the new episode of How Do They Afford That, which came out yesterday. This week's episode is all about set and forget investing. So it's really, I would say, a must listen for anybody interested in investing, Sean.
Yes, absolutely. Set and forget. It's a very interesting topic because sometimes it's a great idea and other times it ain't.
Indeed. And we explore both sides. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Thursday, the 9th of March, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.